One of my favorite questions that I ask people is, what does your room look like? And every single person is right, and every single person's answer is different.
This is Michael Allen Herman.
And Josie Eli Herman. We're the creators behind Acorn Arts and Entertainment.
Today we're here with the lovely T. Luna Alexander, the creator of The Inn at the End of Things.
In this interview, we talk about how Luna created this magical inn at the crossroads of our minds,
where her characters come from,
and even dive into the parallel journey this podcast has with her own life.
It's a beautiful conversation about fellowship and taking chances, and we hope you enjoy. Well, we are so excited because we have a wonderful episode here talking with the one and only Luna about her incredible show, The Inn at the End of Things.
Hi, guys.
Hello. Thank you for being here. We're so excited to talk about your show today. We wanted to begin just by saying, where did the inspiration for this beautiful idea of The Inn come from?
Oh, sure. So during the pandemic, we were all kind of trapped in our inside pods, right? And we're all doom scrolling through our phones, and I had come across a few threads of just folks looking for comfort. And I remember this specific tweet when we all still did that. I remember this tweet from a girl, and she was talking about how in this crazy world of uncertainty that we were living in, that she just wanted this little world like The Hobbit, but not the big adventures of, the dragons and the Lord of the Rings. She just wanted like little no stakes or low stakes adventures of like the folks at the Prancing Pony or, Inhabited, who's upsetting milk carts and who's, creating little chaoses. And I always was like, oh, wow, that's such a great idea. Fast forward for me a little bit later, I had some health stuff going on in my life, and my insomnia had gotten way worse than usual. I've always been kind of a night owl, and then found myself, well past the witching hour, just pretty much every night. And I had this idea of like, my grandmother's, with me, that I would be reading something or, trying not to spend too much time on my screens because that keeps you up even longer,
absolutely.
right? Yeah. And so I was feeling bad about being on my screens, but also, like trying to get to sleep. And so I started reading again a lot more than I had. I always tell myself, I don't have time for that book, or I don't have time for this series. And well, here I was, late at night. And so I started reading a lot more, and again, just sort of feeling this presence of my grands around me. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if they'd had like this little hotel or a little inn, bed and breakfast, where they would just sit together with you and around the kitchen table and share some tea. That's kind of where it was born from, was this idea, what if there was this character that was just both my grands, in one person? And then I started thinking about, well, what if they didn't have to be tied to reality? What if it was just this little space in my brain? And so that's kind of where the inn was born, was this idea of this.
Absolutely.
And then how did that get tied in with the folklore element? And how did, when did that sort of evolve from this idea of the inn itself and this magical inn to and now we're going into folklore stories?
Sure. So my grandmother Alice, Grand Alice, as she called herself, she was never a grandmother. She was Grand Alice my entire life,
of course.
Which was always weird to me growing up, being like, wait, you don't also have a Grand Alice? Like, what's going on? So she got me a book of African-American folklore when I was a very young kid, and I loved it. It had a bunch of beautiful pictures. It was called Her Stories. I'm forgetting the author's name at the moment, but an incredible collection. And then several books around Brer Rabbit or again, just American folklore. So I grew up with a lot of those. And then my other grandmother, Grandma Martha, she loved to travel. She taught herself how to drive in her own RV. Wow. When she retired, she sold her house and just did that and traveled across the country.
So cool.
She was so cool. And so she was kind of always an inspiration. Both of them were an inspiration in their own ways. But she would give me books from Alaska and about Alaskan folklore or Hawaiian folklore. And so I just always had these books growing up of different stories and tales from folks all over the world. So for the inn, again, kind of their folk tale telling or reading these stories before bed was always deeply linked with those two women I grew up with. Usually celebrations would come with a new book or some new ideas or some new stories. And so for me, that was just sort of always linked together. And I will mention, I think what really triggered it, I read a book, Women Who Run with Wolves, an incredible, incredible book right around 2021. And I read through it, and the author, who, again, her name is absolutely missing me at the moment. She has written an amazing set of stories from all over the world, but tying it in with her own PhD in folklore and in a lot of psychology. So she brings a Jungian approach to a lot of stories and very much believes, with her background, I believe she comes from a Mexican and Romanian background. So very a vibrant, full of storytellers, but cultures where they very much see stories as medicine, as tools in your lives, not just like, oh, these are cute little fairy tales that help you fall asleep. Always within those fairy tales are tools and inspirations to help you in your day-to-day life from our elders and from those who've come before. So I read this book. It kind of rekindled this love of folklore that I'd kind of been missing or had kind of drifted away from. And so it just seemed like it was this perfect melting pot all at the same time of like, ding, there's the idea, of just sort of immersing myself back in these stories, in my grandmother's wisdom and the tales that they told me. And then finding in Women Who Run with Wolves, a real practical approach from someone who is a scientist, who comes from a scientific background, but also a folklore background. And I thought, wouldn't it be like, wow, we're really missing so much of that right now. And so I think the inn was really born out of the wisdom of those women and in general.
And finding these folktales around the world, they're very relatable.
Oh my gosh.
Like they're very old, and they're also maybe not from the culture that we are. And yet it's like, oh, I feel that, it can be a very, very powerful tool of connectivity.
Yeah. Helping us remember, I think that some archetypes, some stories are so universal, right? And that the perspectives may be completely different. And in fact, that may be even more helpful to see or hear or experience a nugget of truth that maybe you've heard before, but hearing it from a different perspective or a different culture can help reawaken something new in it that maybe you didn't remember or hadn't connected with yet.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
And speaking a little bit about the kind of the diversity of this world and all of these different cultures and stuff, for anybody who hasn't listened to the inn all the way through, pretty much every episode has a new character that tells a story. How did you come about creating some of those characters?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I guess, it started for me with the rooms. I had the idea of, okay, what would a magical TARDIS-like, Doctor Who, it's bigger on the inside, magical bed and breakfast feel like? And who would be in these rooms? And so it kind of, I gave myself a little outline of, all right, let's figure out some rooms in this whimsical place. And then sort of from there was asking who would be in each of these rooms. Some I'd had just kooky ideas for a long time. I knew I wanted to, at some point, write a story about a mermanatee. I just love the sound of it. Yeah. There's a comic series I love, or a graphic novel series I love called Saga.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of fun, and it just has crazy insane characters, and some of them are just not what you expect. Some are like part animal and part human, right? And so I was like, well, what if you had, I know sailors thought that manatees were mermaids, but I wondered to myself, what would it look like if the top half were, the manatee part, and then the bottom half were the human part, so some of that was, had been silly questions in the back of my mind, just sort of rattling around for years that were just goofy. But some characters honestly came from like necessity. You mentioned the last episode, which happens in the library. And one of my favorite characters is Dr. Morio. And he is a librarian from the Library of Alexandria, which is, I have no personal connection to, but man, it's been like a sad part of my heart ever since finding out it burned down at the age of 8,
It's like, I just discovered that this was the thing, and then I discovered it burned down.
Master library, but I can't access it. Oh my God, it burned to the, what a terrible thing. And, again, I kind of mentioned I was going through some health things at the time, and I have a lot of friends in general who have, we're in our 30s now. We're all discovering little health things about ourselves. And, we were kind of joking about, doctors and how difficult it can be to find human doctors right now, especially. And honestly, Dr. Moria was like, I'm going to write for myself and a good friend of mine, just the doctor we wish we'd had. So that's some of it, is just honestly coming up with characters. And, actually, let me ask you guys, because I know that you each got to write an episode, and we had a little bit of some guidelines around like what the room was, right? But like, if you don't mind me asking, how did you guys find yourselves coming across the characters in your episodes?
That is such a good question. One of the rooms that we love very, very dearly is the cellar when you go all the way down. And there's just a different rhythm to the magic down there. And finding the spirit of a character who would live in that space, that sort of like led us to who that person might be.
I remember before writing that episode, we kind of chatted about what the character could kind of be like. And you had said something like they might be sort of somewhat spooky. And then you find out, oh, no, they're not as spooky as you think. And so I remember that was kind of the guideline that we were looking at when we approached that episode, and just coming up with this idea of someone who hides, someone who is kind of scared to show themselves to someone else, and why is that we're sometimes scared to show who we are to somebody else, and then finding the beauty in sharing yourself with someone else. Yeah, that was just something that kind of just came from, like you said, kind of the room itself. It's like in the cellar, what are there in the shadows? And it's like a little bit spooky, but there's also this like comfort there. It's also kind of a place of storage, I guess. And we're like storing our emotions. And then when is the appropriate time to take something out of the cellar and share it,
Sure. That's, I love that. And I remember like when we were talking about that episode specifically, because I love what you guys came up with. I kind of joked like I'd love to undo the kind of like mystery of the basement, going into the basement, right? And it's always in pop culture, it's the spooky place. You don't go into the basement, you're not coming out alive, And wanting to like flip that on its head and talk about, like, I love that you recognized, again, not to bring up Young too much, but like that there's this almost like this storage quality of the deep places, right? And the places that maybe are a little subconscious or we don't think of right away. And what would a person who lives in that space and celebrates shadows without malicious intent, just being themselves, right? Or folks who are cast into shadows, maybe but not by their own choice. How would it be to share vulnerably? You guys did such a beautiful job of bringing Sitka to life in a way that invites the listener to see everything in their own imagination without giving anything away. And I loved that.
That is something that we have always really admired about how you're crafting this show.
From episode 1.
From episode 1, I remember when we first listened to that, you kind of have these details of, oh, it's the perfect color. But you don't describe what that color is because it's so subjective to the listener. The listener can put in that color themselves and go like, that color is meaningful for me. So when I hear that, I know what color it is. And that's just one example. There's lots of other little things like that
tons,
in the show.
And it gently stretches your imagination as a listener. It allows you to go like, oh yeah, I can imagine that. Totally. And now I can imagine a little bit more. And I think that's one of the great tools of the Inn is it allows you to expand as much as you want to with that tool.
Yeah, I really like that. It's like stretching your imagination.
Yeah.
Sure. It's like practicing with your imagination. I feel like people don't often train and exercise their imagination. We just think like you imagine things or you don't, but
but that was intentional from the beginning. Like Luna, you like thought that.
Oh yeah. I think so some of this is we've talked a little bit about the idea of sleep theater or like almost the listener being an active co-director. You're kind of bringing your own set and your costumes and your own 2-hour production, right? So we're collaborating with you, dear listener, to go ahead and co-create this world together. One of my favorite questions that I ask people is, what does your room look like? And every single person is right. And every single person's answer is different. And that's what I love about this world is that we can kind of co-create in that sleepy little place right before you fall asleep. It is also one of our most creative times, is right in that like window before sleep and waking. And when our guard is ironically down, because you're trying to go to bed, but also your subconscious is at its heightened state because it knows that you're trying to fall asleep. So ironically, when all of your red alerts are highest is right when you're trying to relax. And there's some really fun science behind that. And so what I wanted to do was give little exercises, little things that, again, don't feel like work. It's just literally your mind doing gentle work that you would usually be doing scrolling or watching TV or reading a book, but allowing you to fill in those details so that your mind is almost tiring itself out as you're falling asleep and you're getting ready for dreamland, One thing I love and hate immersive theater sometimes. I really love it. And I think it can be so fun for an audience member who has never done it. But it has to be done in a way that is consensual and like gives them an opportunity to expand rather than, pulling some poor guy out of the front row and just like sitting him on a
make
stool.
Him feel embarrassed.
Make him feel.
And now you're in a chair in front of everybody.
Of course,
and that's this was almost like an answer to that, like the opposite of that in every way. You'll never be seen. There will never be an audience, but you get to create this world and fill in the colors and fill in the numbers or fill in details that have a meaning to you, right? And that's, I think, some of the most fun creative expression, right? Is when like maybe nobody is witnessing, but we're able to participate.
Were there any other themes or messages that were like a major focus for this first season?
Well, honestly, I started this about a year ago. God, it's almost exactly a year, which is crazy because we started chatting in a coffee shop around August, end of July. It's crazy. So I knew for this year in general has been, there's a lot of power to trickster tales. And why I say that is, folks who don't necessarily find themselves in places of power, finding ways to thrive and finding ways not just to survive, but to win, to get the wins. And some of them do, some of the tales you win and some you lose. And hey, that's just part of it, right? But I do find a lot of power in trickster tales, in the stories of the hustle, in the stories of, how our folks.
I've never heard somebody describe trickster tales as the story of the hustle, but that is so good.
But it is, right? It's like, how is a Nazi going to pull this one off? How are our, little Bremen town musicians going to find their corner of the world, right? Like, how do we make gold out of straw? And so many folk and fairy tales are full of that wisdom that helped me narrow down a little bit a very big, broad world of folk fairy tales from all over. Figuring out ways to, again, not only survive, but to thrive in times of turmoil or trouble. Again, not in positions of power, but finding ways to gain their own power against impossible odds. And stuff that I felt was very relevant and needed right now, for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you're right. I mean, people are turning straw into gold every day and trying to figure it out. And I think that's one of the reasons why those kind of stories hit you on such a deep level. And I think folklore in general, because you imagine yourself in so many different characters. You're like, I'm part this, but I'm part that, and I'm part this. So you start to see like, sometimes you are the trickster, sometimes you are the tricky, and you start to see how all of those pieces, metaphorically collide across what you do in a day. And that's, it's very cool.
Sure.
We hate to ask you this question, but it's a good question to ask.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite episode or scene? Maybe a most challenging, something that was like, that you had to like work through?
Yeah. I mean, I love all my children equally. But if I had a favorite, I truly do love all of these episodes. Each one is a labor of love, or not, not a labor, but truly a story that comes from, if not my own personal experiences, somebody I know or is inspired by them. I will say that, so I'm not a sound designer at all. Pretty much a lot of this has been making it up as I go or finding it on YouTube University or asking you guys,
I mean, I think you're a sound designer now.
Hey,
You
and
do a great job.
now it's official. So, but I think, honestly, the bathroom episode, figuring out how to create the sound of a ship in a bottle coming outside the bottle in a magical way was such a feat. And I spent a lot of time on it. We won't even talk about it. But when we finally, all the pieces came together, y'all, my neighbors could hear the shriek of like literally a eureka. I woke my husband up at like 2 a.m. figuring that one out. So that was a really big one for me personally, just creating Neptune's magical whatever,
Yes.
that came together. So that was a really beautiful one.
And that's a beautiful experience when like it's in your head, and then when it finally kind of comes out and you go like, oh, I just heard what's in my head, and it made sense, and I can visualize it.
Yes, and it's even better than what I thought
Yeah.
somehow. Oh my God, the horn was great. Like all of these little things. I think it happens in theater a lot too, and that was a
Yes.
feeling for me where I was just like, money. There's the magical moment that I'd been looking for. I will say the last episode is probably my absolute favorite if I had to choose any of our, episodes, just because it's so many of my favorite things all in one space. It's a library episode. It's about healing. It's about storytelling. It's an Anansi story that's actually secretly like 5 Anansi stories in one,
Yep.
Yeah.
It also has Dan Johnson,
Yes.
who
We love Dan Johnson.
we
Yes.
love,
Dan Johnson.
and I've been
And-
so blessed to call my colleague for a long time.
And Dan Johnson, for our listeners of other shows, plays both Roscoe in Silver Tongues as well as Necromon and Officer
And
Mason.
Officer Mason,
in
yeah.
Call of the Blades. So, we love, if you haven't noticed, we love Dan
He's
Johnson.
been in every show we've made thus far.
Yep, and intentionally so. Well, we love you, Dan, and yeah, it was just such a beautiful. Again, that feeling of all the magic pieces coming together. And that was a pretty heavy sound design episode too. So that was also
Yeah,
a nice
sure was.
challenge, and getting to use all the little tricks and tools that I kind of picked up along the season was just such a fun celebration, I think, of like everything we'd been doing up until that point, but also just being able to celebrate, good storytelling by a damn good actor. It's, what's not to love?
Actually, a question about that. I mean, you don't have to
Sure.
talk about this if you don't want to,
Please.
but stepping into this medium of audio drama and
Yeah,
sound
yeah,
designing,
yeah.
which it seems like one medium, but it's actually like 15
Yes.
different
Oh,
hats.
that's so true.
How did you find that medium?
Sure. That's a great question. I feel like it was so for a long time I'd held off doing much about the inn after, I'd written an episode and I had some ideas, but after editing my first episode, I was like, I don't know if I could ever do this again. And so I kind of shelved it for a good 6 months or so. And honestly, not to overshare, my dad unfortunately left us last July. And I, after all of the hubbub of funeral and your family and the support and the love, my dad was a writer. And so I just couldn't stop hearing his voice in my head, like, what are you doing, kid? Like, yeah, it's hard. It's going to be hard. We have to earn the story. That's how we earn the story.
Yeah.
And so I just kept hearing him say, we got to earn the story, which led to more sleepless nights. So it was like, all right, let's just give it a shot. That's honestly what I gave you guys a call, was after like coming up with an outline and like putting things together. And so for a long time, it felt like this hurdle that I could never cross. And then I started recognizing that in that were so many of the other hurdles I'd faced in my other, my life, of, I could never do theater. Well, then I started doing, or I could never do college, or I could never do this job or that job. And then recognizing just one step at a time, let's go ahead and tackle it. And we have support, and you have people who care about this project. So you're not alone. So let's just do it. So I think it was kind of one of those big fears that we had to face and just do it anyway. And a dear mentor of mine said, would say, you can't spell scare without care. And I always thought that was so cheesy, and I rolled my eyes like into the back of my skull, y'all. But I've been hearing it, and I start saying it now with my own students, and they also roll their eyes in turn until they're going to come to that moment and they're going to hear it.
Gotta go full circle.
2-3 years later, they're going to go, wait, that was so wise.
We love you, Terry. Love you, Terry Hexibert. So thank you for that. But yeah, I think that's honestly the answer was yes, it was an absolute monster. I'd never really tackled it in theater productions. Had always left that up to other people, or film productions, left that up to other people. Now it's fun. Now it's exciting, you know? And yeah, there's still the little grumbles of like, oh, I gotta edit out everybody's mouth sounds. And, you know?
Sure.
Hey, but again, we get to earn the story and make our actors sound incredible, which they are already. And so I think that being able to overcome that just created so much more joy with the production, you know?
Yeah.
I will also say just the joy of my aunt. She'll text me when she makes it almost all the way through an episode. And she'll be like, I didn't make it to the story. And I'm like, great, that means you got a great night's sleep. And then she'll text me later with the, you know, the rest of it. But that literally always makes my whole day. Just knowing that not only folks out there in the universe having a great time on the internets, being able to get some sleep, but you know, the people that I love and care about, being able to get just a little bit of peace is that's so much reward. That's why we do it, right?
That's why we do it. Well, it is there for anybody who needs a little bit of a respite in the storm. The inn is waiting for you. Luna, this has been such a joy. Thank you so much for talking. Thank you for this time.
Thank you for creating such a beautiful, beautiful show. Such a tender, tender world that you can just dive into.
Thank you guys, and truly just thank you for believing in this show and this project. Looking back is crazy, and looking forward is even better. So much love, you guys.
Much love.
Thanks.
The Inn at the End of Things is currently available wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're a fan of the Inn, or Acorn Arts in general, please consider sending us a one-time donation or joining our Patreon for exclusive behind-the-scenes goodies.
We also love hearing from you folks on social media, so feel free to reach out anytime.
Until next time.
Stay sane.